And thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Jonah. I am from Discover, and today we're going to be talking to Jay about podcasting and how to produce a high quality podcast with a small team or a small budget. Jay, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Jonah. Good to be back here with Teachable Discover. Happy Discover Fest, everybody. Such a cool event that you guys are putting on this year.
Yeah, and worth mentioning, thank you everybody. If you've been watching Discoverfest, we are on day 3. We've had 4 creators every day for the last 2 days, and today and tomorrow and Friday. So feel free, go down to the link in our description if you want to see the full schedule. All of those are available for replays as well, so you haven't missed anything if you haven't been here yet, but you can also sign up for the events coming for the rest of the week. And we're covering everything from like business and marketing to art to language learning. We have some like a French and a German class coming too.
Fun.
So it's a super diverse week, and it's been a total blast. And yeah, feel free to hop in the comments. Let us know where you heard about Jay, where you heard about Discover. Let us know if you can hear and see us all right as well. We want to make sure that's good. And where you're tuning in from. We get people from all over the world, so it's super fun to see that. And if you're watching the replay as well, please hop in the comments and let us know. We love coming back and seeing those engagements as well and seeing the comments and the space that's happening there. And feel free to ask any questions throughout the presentation, but we will have a dedicated Q&A after the presentation where we'll make sure to get to all those questions. So if we don't answer it right away, pop in there during the Q&A and ask again. And if anything happens during the presentation or Jay is moving fast, I know he's got a lot of info he's going to give us today. There will be a YouTube channel and on the Discover event page, and also emailed to you if you RSVP to the event along with the course offer. So nothing's going to be lost. If you're tuning in late, you're not missing anything. It will all be here for you. So proper introductions. Like I said, we are talking to Jay today about how to produce a high quality podcast with a small team or a small budget. We're going to learn how to create a commercially viable show in 2022, and we'll cover what to focus on before your launch, how to produce a show that stands out, landing big name guests, and how to sound great with a small team or a small budget. A little background on Jay. Jay has been podcasting since 2018. His first podcast, Upside, has more than 150 episodes and 150,000 total downloads. In 2020, Jay took what he learned to launch Creative Elements. In less than a year, Creative Elements has broken 500,000 downloads and 200 plus 5-star reviews. Jay, I don't want to take up any more time because I know you got a lot to give us here today. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Amazing. Well, excited to be back here, Jonah. I also will have a link to get the slides if you guys want at the end of the presentation. That was kind of an afterthought. Sorry, Jonah, I should have sent it to you earlier so we could highlight it, but it is at the end of the presentation, so we got
no worries.
Stick
Love
around.
It. Sweet.
All right. Can you share my screen?
Yeah, we got you up there.
All right. Well, as Jonah said, today we're talking about producing a high-quality podcast with a small team or a small budget, because I know there are a lot of indie podcasters out there like myself, and we don't have a huge team. We don't have a huge budget, but you can still sound really professional and make people think that this person must have a big team or a big budget. My name is Jay. As Jonah said, I'm the host of Creative Elements. That show is nearing 1 million downloads now, less than 2 years in, which is very, very exciting. On that show, I talk to some of your favorite creators about how they do what they do. How do they make a living from their art and creativity? People like Seth Godin and James Clear, artists like Andy J. Pizza, Austin Kleon, Lauren Hom, Vanessa Van Edwards. It's really, really fun. And this is my cat, Baloo. No reason to show you Baloo other than I love him and he's adorable, and I thought you might like to look at him too. He's a Norwegian forest cat, and he's kind of a jerk, but we love him anyway. I'm here because I have a course here on Teachable called Podcasts Like the Pros, where I teach everything in disgusting depth and detail in terms of what I do to make this show work. It's gotten a ton of great reviews and feedback from the students. So all of this actually comes from that course. We have here 2.5, 3 lessons worth of kind of beginning content of that course out of 36 lessons. So a lot to get through. Let's get into it. Podcasting is awesome. Literally my favorite thing. Because of Creative Elements, I've been featured on Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Castro, Apple Podcasts for a short period of time. And I've gotten to talk to people like Seth Godin, James Clear, Vanessa Van Edwards, Ali Abdaal, Matt Diavella, the guy who directed Minimalism, Pat Flynn. And the show has done really, really well. This was just the first year of its life. It broke 500,000 downloads. And as I said, I think I'll break 1 million downloads in January. I really wanted to get it by the end of this year, but it's looking more like January of next year. A lot of great reviews. This is an old screenshot, but we're over 200 5-star reviews now. And what makes me really happy and really pleased is that the creators who come on this show also remark that this was a different experience and a better final product than they are used to. David Perel, after he came on the show, shared it in his very popular newsletter, and he wrote, "This interview is unlike most of the ones I've done because it's so well edited. It's less like a traditional interview and more like an NPR show." That is huge praise. So thank you, David. That's incredible. But that's the experience that I want my guests to have, because if the guests have it, then the listeners are certainly going to have it, and that's a good thing for everybody. I take production quality on this show very seriously. And as Jonah said, this isn't my first podcast. Upside, now over 200 episodes actually, and nearing 200,000 downloads all time. This is about 3 years old, so it hadn't had the same success as my current show, Creative Elements, but it taught me a lot about producing a show, about interviewing, about being comfortable on the microphone, about finding my voice, all kinds of things. And I also had some help from the team over at the Podglomerate, which is a podcast network that Creative Elements is proud to be a part of. And in podcasts like The Pros, I dive into podcast networks as well, what it takes to join a network, why you might want to consider it. I actually interviewed Jeff, the CEO of the network, to get his perspective as well. Podcasting is a lot of work, though. Like, I'm not going to lie to you, to take as much care and put as much effort into this as I do, it's quite a bit of work. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of how to produce this and make it sound really great, I wanted to talk first about why should you start a show in the first place? Like, why should you care? If this is a lot of work, why would I do it? Podcasting is the best networking hack that I've ever found. There is no chance that I would have this screenshot and this experience of talking with Seth Godin if I didn't have a podcast. It also forces you to be a better speaker. I fundamentally think that having a podcast is maybe the best speaking exercise you can have, maybe even better than Toastmasters, because with a podcast, you can interview anyone all over the world. Seth Godin's not going to drop into my Toastmasters class. You can edit your podcast before you share it with people. You can listen to recordings of yourself to know, like, how am I doing? And you can get way more reps. You can just practice a lot more when you have a podcast. Podcasting helps you create a habit of publishing. If you publish anything, it's basically like making your own lottery ticket. Any piece of content you make, any piece of content that you put a lot of effort into and put out into the world, you have no idea who can come across it, who it may impact, who may make a choice that helps you because they saw that piece. The whole world runs on humans and decisions, and someone somewhere has the ability to make a decision that elevates you and can change your life. And when you create content, you put it out into the world, it's like printing your own lottery tickets. And then we have the case of, well, what if podcasting does go really well for me? You see people like Joe Rogan, like, I know this is like cream of the crop, top of the pile, whatever you think about him. The guy from Fear Factor changed his life because of podcasting, like became one of the most well-known media powerhouses and influencers in the world because of a podcast. 10, 11 times as many listeners as Howard Stern, the #1 radio personality. And if we look at Joe's show, and this is like dated information, this is 2017 or 2018, but in 2017 or 2018, he was doing 200 downloads per month. If he was selling ads at an $18 CPM, which is low, he could be making anywhere between $64 and $240 million per year in podcast advertising revenue alone. That is bonkers. That is crazy. That is a lot of money. And podcasting is just getting more popular. More people are listening to podcasting all the time in the US. The average listener listens to 7 podcasts per week. So there's a lot of potential for you as someone getting into podcasting now. But it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. There are over 1 million active podcasts. This might actually be nearing 2 million at this point, which sounds like a lot, but there are also 40 million YouTube channels. So to me, that just reeks of opportunity. Like, smells like opportunity. I've never done that before. I'm sorry. So if you're going to do it, if you're going to get into podcasting, you need to stand out because there are more people entering all the time. It's getting more competitive all the time. Even though there's still a lot of opportunity, that doesn't mean that it's easy for you to capture it. So some questions to ask yourself as you're starting your podcasting journey. What is the point? What is your goal in doing the podcast? And be really honest with yourself. Do you want to make money from it? Do you want to get new clients? Do you want to grow your own creative platform? Understand and be honest with yourself what your goal is for doing a podcast so you'll know if you're being successful or not. Who is it for? Who is going to listen to your show? What type of person are they? What do they believe in? What do they want out of life? What does it do for them, that person that you're targeting your show for? And is it already being done for them elsewhere? So let's use some real life examples. Let's talk about creative elements. My goal in creating that show, one, was actually revenue. I wanted to create a commercially viable show that did become a core part of my business model. That show is for aspiring and early stage creators. What it does for them is help them feel like they can reach the same levels of success as their heroes. And it gives them like a behind the curtain on the business side of being a creator. A lot of creators we follow, we love their work, but we don't often hear them talk about, but how did you get to do this full time? I did not think that was being done elsewhere, at least nowhere that had any real popularity or scale yet. So that's how I entered the market. I think you should make a fundamental decision on whether or not your show is going to be more educational or entertaining. There are more entertainers entering podcasting all the time because if I'm an actor or an actress and I already have a public profile and people want to hear more from me, podcasting is great. I'm already media trained. I'm already a great speaker, but I don't have to get into hair and makeup. I don't have to like get dressed any certain way. I can just bring my talents that were created for video and audio to audio, and that's hard to compete with. So for most indie podcasters, I encourage them to think educational first, like how does this better somebody's lives through information and maybe even mindset. Of course, you want to also be entertaining. If you're not entertaining to some degree, people won't listen. But you really want to lean into like, what is it that I'm here to help people with? It's harder to compete with entertainers, it just is. I see Sarah in the chat saying good morning. Good morning to you, Sarah, in Toronto. What is the format of your show? Will you have a co-host? It's nice to have a co-host. On Upside, I've had a co-host for 3 years. It's great because we don't have to do as much prep because we have a natural rapport, so we can build off of one another. And while one person is speaking, the other person can kind of be planning like where we're going next. But it does create some scheduling challenges because I have to find time that works for him and me and our guest. It's just a third layer. Will you interview guests? A lot of people make the assumption that if you're going to do a podcast, you're going to be interviewing guests. Not necessarily true. There are a lot of great solo shows out there. You can mix and match. You don't have to be married to one format or the other long term. You can do both. Do you have any specific recurring segments? A lot of hosts will do this at the end of the show. They'll have like a couple of questions that they'll ask over and over again. Patrick O'Shaughnessy on Invest Like the Best likes to ask, like, what is the kindest thing somebody has done for you? For a long time, Tim Ferriss had, if you could put a billboard anywhere in the world, what would you put on it? Specific segments make your show a little bit more, it's different. It adds a level of like production sheen that a lot of shows won't do, and people look forward to it. What is your target episode length? How long do you want an episode of the show to be? Pre-pandemic, the average commute time in the US was 26.6 minutes. So that's why a lot of shows will target the 20 to 30 minute mark. But a lot of people do listen at 1.5 speed or more, so you can get away with a longer episode. You can have any length that you want, but there is a trade-off between the longer your show is. I think the harder it is to get people to click play for the first time, because it's a big commitment to say, I'm going to watch this for an hour. I mean, how often do you open a YouTube video, you see that it's 10 minutes, and you think, ugh, how can I watch this right now? And yet we're putting out our 90-minute long, podcast episodes. How often we publish? Another assumption people make is that they need to publish a new episode every week. And that is absolutely not true. You can put it out every 2 weeks, once a month. The argument for publishing more frequently is that it gives you more ad inventory that you can sell. Like, the real argument for publishing more frequently is just that you can make more money. But if you're getting started and you don't have advertisers, you're not filling your ad inventory, it doesn't necessarily benefit you to burn yourself out by publishing every week if it's stressing you out. So consider doing it less often. I do believe that shorter podcasts will win out for people entering the market now. Even when I entered the market, probably would have been better to have a shorter show. I try to keep my episodes under 60 minutes because I think there's kind of a psychological threshold when people see that something is more than an hour versus less. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for shows that are less than 20 minutes, less than 15 minutes, less than 10 minutes. The Daily Stoic podcast with Ryan Holiday, usually less than 10 minutes. And that's a lot easier to slot into your day, into your week. So let's assume I've convinced you that you want to start a show and that you can keep up with this and that you can make something unique. Let's talk about booking guests. If you're going to have guests, not every show needs guests, but if you're going to have guests, let's talk about how you book them. Because the quality of your show, the quality of your guests largely determines the quality of your show. I have a transcript made for every episode of my show, and you'll see this in my process here coming up. I can see the percentage of time the guest is speaking versus the percentage of time I'm speaking. And it's kind of crazy. It's literally like an 80-20 on every episode, 80% guest, 20% me. So if 80% of your show is the guest speaking, it's easy to understand then why the quality of your guest determines the quality of your show. So when you're booking a guest, ask yourself, does this person have a strong understanding of the topic I want them to talk about? Are they able to articulate that understanding and their perspective well? There are some wicked smart people out there who have a really hard time taking their understanding and forcing it into language for people to understand. And if you can't articulate what you know so other people can learn from it, it's not going to be a great listening experience. Are they easy to listen to? They might have a lot of vocal tics, or maybe they have bad audio. Like, this is an audio medium, so you need to be considering, is this going to be easy to listen to and something I enjoy listening to, or is there going to be a lot of hurdles? And it's okay if there are a lot of hurdles. Like, it's great to have guests on that bring an international perspective and may have accents. They can bring a lot of insight, and that may not always be quote unquote easy to listen to, but it's worth it. It's not a end all be all. You just need to think, like, in this mix, is this going to work out nicely? Does this guest have name recognition to my audience? My show, most of the title of the episode is the name of the guest. And so if my audience doesn't recognize that guest's name, not a very compelling thing to click on. If you want to, lure people in to click play for the first time, they're probably going to click play when they recognize the person or the idea that you're leading with. So does that guest have name recognition with my existing audience? Does that guest have the ability to bring their own audience to my show? And not only the ability, but the likelihood of interest. A lot of people go on a lot of shows. People who come on Creative Elements, they do a lot of interviews. I know that when I share the episode with them, it'd be great if they share it, but a A lot of them probably won't, because they're not going to share every episode of every podcast they go on, or it just becomes their content is a feed of their podcast guest appearances, which won't happen. So even if they do have an audience to bring to your show, I wouldn't expect that to be your core marketing strategy, unless you live in this wonderful space where you're talking to guests who have an audience, but still have kind of a chip on their shoulder, and they're trying to prove themselves. That audience is like raving super fans of their work, then maybe. But a lot of times it's not going to be the guest audience that drives your show. When you book guests, you should really reach high. There's this advice that kind of got cycled around the podcasting world that was like, if you're getting started, start with C-level guests. That'll get you to B-level guests, and eventually you'll build up to A-level guests. And I think you should go to the A-level guests right away, because it's a lot easier to book A-level guests when they see other A-level guests on your show. People get a lot of emails. People get a lot of pitches. If they read your pitch, if they read your email saying, will you come on my show? They'll click the link, look at your show, try to see how many ratings and reviews you have, and also see what other guests have been on that show as a signal for, do people like me do things like this? Do people like me go on shows like this? So the earlier you get big name guests, the sooner you set the precedent. This is who I talk to. If you don't have personal relationships with anybody kind of at a high level or at one of those high levels, try to get an introduction when you can. If you can't get one, cold email still works really, really well. And when you reach out through cold email, there are a few ways or a few things that you should include. Tell them why you're reaching out. Like, be direct, be obvious. No guessing games here. I would love for you to come on my show. Include a short pitch of the show, short. Tell them how much time you need. In the beginning, I was saying, would you be available for a 45-minute remote interview? And then ask them or share them what they need to do to prepare, which should be like nothing. You really want to make preparation nothing for them other than clicking your scheduling link, booking a time. If you're reaching out to big name guests and you're asking them to fill out an entire guest questionnaire, like, it's just not going to happen. I'm not a big name guest, but when people ask me to come on their show and they're like, give me a bio, give me a headshot, give me a title, give me your website, give me any other links you want. Like, I get it. It's a lot of work, and I have that top of mind. It should be easy for me, but I don't want to do it. And I'm probably going to just ignore your email because you're giving me more work. So if you're reaching high, like, make your preparation very small, and then give them a generous window for recording. The worst thing is when someone sends me an email saying, will you come on my show? And it's great. It's so well written. Yes, I would love to come on your show. And it ends with, do you have time in the next week or two? No, I don't have time in the next week or two. Nobody has time in the next week or two. And any time that I do have the next week or two, I am protecting with my life. Instead, say, do you have 60 minutes for a remote interview in the next couple of months? Like, make the window so big that, of course, I have time for 60 minutes in the next couple of months. That is how you get people to say yes. Here is literally, people ask me all the time, how did you get Seth on your show? I started by building a little bit of a relationship. He had a program called the Podcast Fellowship. I took part in it with my other show, Upside. He wrote an email about podcasting be the new blogging. I responded to that email in October of 2018 and said, hey, thanks for this class that I paid to take. Because of it, our podcast that came out of that class was featured in Fortune magazine. And that was awesome. Thank you. So I was just saying thank you. No ask here. Just wanted to say thank you. Then when I launched Creative Elements, I just followed up on the same email thread because he did respond to it. So I just basically said, like, hey, I'm starting a second show. My first show has over 100 episodes, 105-star ratings. Wouldn't be there without your course. I love podcasting so much. I'm starting a second show, and I want to come out of the gate strong. The goal of the show is to help creatives hear from their heroes about how to make a living from their art and creativity. I had some social proof, set up, interviewed James Clear, and he said, awesome, happy to do it next month if you want to pick some dates. Amazing. Similarly, when I reach out to guests that I don't have a relationship with, here's an email to Sarah McAllister of a company called Go Clean Co. They have 2 million followers on Instagram. And I start with, a point of connection. Your Instagram and Facebook group has transformed my apartment because my girlfriend loves it. She's been talking about you so much, and I've been following your story now. I think what you've built is incredible. If you're open to it, I'd love to interview on my podcast, Creative Elements. Here's the pitch. Creative Elements helps artists and creators make a living from the things that they make, and I'm talking to people like you who have figured out how to make that work. It's a high production show. It's been featured in Apple Podcasts, CastBox, Stitcher, and Pocket Cast. Would you be open for a 45-minute remote interview for the show? We have 28 episodes now. So you see, like, it's direct, it's to the point, and there's social proof all throughout to make them think this is a good use of my time. Sometimes if I'm getting an intro, I will pass basically the same email to someone who I know can make the intro so that they can just forward it. I said, would you forward this email to Laura LeCompte? If she's open to it, I'd love to have her on the podcast. All the same information is right there. All he has to do is hit forward to Laura, say, do you want to go on the show? She responds yes. He replies all, introduces us. Easy, easy peasy. So now let's get into the workflow for how I produce the show once I've, figured out who I want to have on the show. The first step is what we were just talking about, identifying guests. I do this in Airtable. I have a database of potential podcast guests, and I schedule their publication dates, the publish dates, the interview dates. I manage the entire process workflow in Airtable. This is kind of the spreadsheet view of it. I'll show you some more screenshots inside of Airtable of how I move this along, but there's a status. Each, row is a guest, and there's a status of this is a target that I want to talk to, or this interview has been scheduled, or this interview has been recorded. I update the status in a Kanban board and move it along. I'll reach out to those guests once I have a target. This is that other Kanban view board view. You have targets, pitch sent, interview scheduled. I was going to try to highlight this, but I can't show my cursor. Interview recorded, scripting, in editing, final review, scheduled, and published. This is the whole process beginning to end, all the steps that I need to take. And by having this Kanban view board, I can basically manage and produce multiple episodes in tandem at different stages of the process. I email the guests and schedule using a tool called SavvyCal. This is what SavvyCal looks like inside. It's really easy. I open up specific blocks of time that people can schedule. They just click that. They give their name, their email address, their phone number, anything else they want me to know, and they get emailed a calendar invite with the call-in information, everything they need to do. No other prep. You just go to SavvyCal and you schedule, and we're good. I'll do the rest. They get this calendar invite that looks something like this with the URL of the Squadcast call-in link. Then I start preparing. And I prepare in Notion. I have a template for every episode that I make. Actually, when somebody schedules in SavvyCal, it creates a new page in Notion for me to start researching. And what I'll do here is I will define an episode goal for every episode. I recently spoke to Andy J. Pizza, the host of Creative Pep Talk, and I wanted to talk to him about translating your ideas into a message people can understand, because he's really good at doing a solo show and taking an idea and crafting it in a way with storytelling that people understand. I'll do research, and then I'll form my questions. And my questions are based on that episode goal. If I want to learn from him how to translate your ideas into a message people understand, if I want to talk about storytelling, the questions I'm going to ask are going to be related to storytelling. We do the interview, and Squadcast is what I use. A lot of people like Riverside. They're similar products. I'm just Team Squadcast. This is an old view of the UI. It doesn't quite look like this anymore, but we do it in Squadcast just like that. I save the individual recording files into Dropbox, because in Squadcast or Riverside or Zencaster, it will give you individual audio files for each guest, and it records it at the point of input. So that's why I love Squadcast. When I talk to a guest, it's recording on their local machine and uploading to the cloud, so it sounds like we're in the same room. I take all the individual audio files out of Squadcast, save them to Dropbox, and I actually have an audio engineer who then mixes the interview. If you're just getting started and you don't want to take this quite as seriously as I do, this can kind of be like your last step or close to your last step. You might want to record an intro, but you can have an engineer mix all this together and you're done. I go a little bit further where I have the engineer mix the initial interview, and then I edit that to make some like editorial choices, which I'll get into here. But this is like advanced technique stuff. I take that interview file and I create a rough transcript in Otter.ai. Otter.ai is a free tool. I love it, love it, love it, love it, because you put your audio into it, it automatically separates the voices of the different speakers in the file, and you can label it by their name. And then you can download that as a transcript. Now, it's AI, so it's not perfect. It's voice recognition software for the purpose of creating a transcript. But this is not the finished transcript. This is just helping me identify different points in the conversation with timestamps. Then I go into editing mode, and I record voiceover in Garageband as well. So this is like a typical episode file close to the end of the process. I have 3 tracks. The top track is the interview file that my audio engineer mixed together. The second track is voiceover that I record directly into Garageband for the intro, voiceover, and the outro. And then I have a third track sometimes that has like third-party audio. So this episode was with Matt Giovanisi. He has a blog that's all affiliate marketing, but he had made like a rap video one time for his website Swim University about pools, and it was hilarious. And we talked about it in the interview, so I got his permission to pull the actual audio into the episode. So instead of just hearing us talk about a thing, you could actually experience the thing, and then now we're all in on the joke. Sorry. And that's what makes the show different, I think, is I'll put the extra time to pull in these pieces of audio so we can all experience this together in real time. But you can see all the cuts here that I make in GarageBand, where I'm cutting out stuff that doesn't need to be there. Sometimes I'm moving parts of the conversation around. Sometimes I'm making space to create voiceover, because I use voiceover for multiple reasons. One, I use it to lead into and out of ad breaks. You can see around the 20-minute mark here and around the 34-minute mark, I have holes. Actually, I guess it's around the 30-minute mark. I have holes where I put in ads, and going into the ad break and out of the ad break, I have voiceover. But by introducing voiceover into the show also, if I ask a question in a stupid way, I can cover for it. I can just remove that question and ask it in voiceover to move the story along. Well, I'll say, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves in the story here. So I wanted to go back to that time that Matt was talking about quitting his job. And I wanted to know what it felt like for him to quit his job. I can record a very direct, nice sounding voiceover that leads into his response to that question. But sometimes my question is like this meandering 30-second piece of garbage that eventually says, like, can you talk about that? And if I delete that, I sound way more concise, I sound way more smart and put together, and the show just sounds better. So I don't mind doing voiceover at all. And in real time, I'm basically constructing a full script of the whole show, like including the interview, including the audio I drop in, including my voiceover, because this is like where I write the voiceover so that when I record it, I can read from something. So I create a script basically in real time using the rough transcript and the voiceovers that I am creating. I do that scripting, I record the intro and the outro, and then I export these 3 files as individual files then that I send to my engineer. And he mixes it all together with my intro music, my outro music, makes it all sound nice. And then I basically do like a real quick spot check when I get the final file back, just to make sure that everything sounds okay, the transitions into music or third-party audio sound okay. I upload it to my hosting provider, which I use Megaphone. This is like the Cadillac of hosting providers. If you're getting started, you might want to use something like Transistor. I have it linked here and in the slides that you'll get after the talk here. But your hosting provider is what sends your episode information to the different podcast players. You enter the title, the description, a link, custom artwork if you want. You don't need to do that. I do that. You don't upload your podcast episode to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Stitcher and all those players every week. You just put it into your hosting provider and they disseminate it to those different platforms. I re-upload that final file to upload to get like a final transcript. And then I upload it, or I bring in a VA from Upwork to clean that up. So instead of paying like rev.com $1 per minute, I think is their rate, I pay someone on Upwork a few dollars per hour, just kind of do a spot check and clean up and make sure that it all makes sense. Then I build the web page for that episode once it's published. This is an episode page on my new website, creativeelements.fm, which I recently made using a tool called Podpage. Podpage is awesome. If you go to jclouse.com/podpage, you can check it out, and you can create a podcast website in like 5 minutes just from your podcast RSS feed. It's incredible. It's so much better than the custom website I was trying to build before this. It's awesome. So jclouse.com/podpage for that. They make it really, really easy. When I'm really on my game, I'll build out audiograms using a tool called Wave, where I'll create from the artwork in an audio file a like visual asset, a video asset that I can put on Instagram or anywhere else that has a clip from the show, also the custom artwork. I publish the show, it schedules and it publishes on the time frame that I say, and you can see it on all the players. Then I email the guest and give them a quick link to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and their specific web page. I also attach the custom artwork. I just say, I hope you've been well. We'll let you know your podcast is out. Here are these links. Attached is the artwork. No expectation to share it, but I would appreciate it. And then I go about marketing it on my own social media, in my email list. Then I start all over again the next week. A lot of steps, I know. And this is why the show sounds very, very good and stands out. It takes me about 9 to 17 hours total per episode. That's usually spread out over weeks, because I do the research, I do the recording, then I do the post-production. It's spaced out. And I do bring people into the process. I have an audio engineer that's just a freelancer that I found on Upwork. He's amazing. I have a VA who's also a freelancer that I found on Upwork. She's amazing. And I know that seems like a lot, but I wouldn't do it if I didn't absolutely love it, if I didn't see results from it, if I didn't hear from a lot of people who really, really enjoy it. So that's just an overview. And if you want to learn more and get like the literal over my shoulder, watch me do this and get all the detail, I encourage you to check out podcasts like The Pros. It's the best thing I've ever made. It gets incredible feedback. We go through ideation, helping you create that structure for your show, thinking about artwork for your show, what makes a show commercially viable. We talk about audio quality, the gear that you should get, how to set your room up, how to get the best sound from your mic and from your guest mic, some basics of mixing, and hiring an audio engineer like me. I actually interview my engineer in the course for his advice for how to hire somebody really good. We talk about booking guests, preparing for interviews. And then module number 5 is what people absolutely rave about. I go in depth on the full process. This 5.1 video is basically what I just showed you. But then I walk you through how I use Airtable, how I use Calendly, how I use Squadcast and Dropbox, how I get my transcripts made, how I hire a VA on Upwork. 5.7, the deep dive on how I edit and script the episodes, is by far the most popular piece of the course. People tell me that video 5.7 is worth the entire course itself. It's almost 30 minutes, walks through the entire process, like literally over my shoulder. Here's how I make an episode. We talk about marketing your show, advertising and sponsorship, and even podcast networks. This is, no kidding, like everything I know about podcasting. It's 36 lessons. Sounds like a lot. It kind of is. It's 5 hours. You don't have to get through that all in one day. I'm just showing you that you are well supported. Whatever questions you have, they're in this course. And if you have further questions, you can comment on the course and I answer. Typically, this course is $199. During Discoverfest, I'm doing a very rare discount on this course because I hate discounting my courses. Hate it, hate it, hate it. But you get 20% off. You can get this for $159 during Discoverfest. Here's the URL, but we'll also flash it on the screen, and you should get it in a follow-up email. Please take me up on this offer. Please get in the course now. It will save you so much time and money and stress if you follow this process for producing your show. I promise you will get a lot out of it. People have given me incredible feedback saying it's amazing. This person said, I can confidently say it's the best course I've ever taken part in. Modules 4, 5, and 6 are pure gold. I've been podcasting for almost 2 years and never considered the many things that you teach, especially relating to the production process. Dara said, your videos for the podcast course are fire. Boris said, your podcasting course is amazing. Ali says, Jay is an amazing creator and host. Kevin says, Jay's show is top-notch quality. Get in on this course and yours will be too. Super nice things. Here are just a few shows that came out of the course, and you can see, like, they did a really good job of taking some of the recommendations I had for podcast artwork and making it look really nice, which is why I'm proud to be an advocate for them. Great shows, great final products coming out of this course. Would love to highlight your show on the page as well. So please take me up on that offer. You should get it via email. And it's also, I think, the first comment in the chat here on YouTube. So in conclusion, podcasting is an awesome tool for networking and publishing. If you take it seriously, it can even be successful monetarily. Taking it seriously is a lot of work, though, and that begins with thinking about the show and how you set it up and structure it. Take your production quality seriously from the beginning. Consider doing bi-weekly or seasonal shows. Here's some ways that you can stay connected with me. There's the URL to get the slides for this presentation if you want to look through it afterwards. workshops.jclouse.com/podcasting. And I would love for you to check out Creative Elements. You can find it in any one of your players, Creative Elements, or at creativeelements.fm. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Would love to just be connected. And Jonah, I think we're about ready for Q&A. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. I've been watching. Haven't seen any questions yet, which means I either overwhelmed you or did a good job of stepping through things. But I have some more time here. Would be happy to answer some more questions that you guys have if you put them in the chat. How did I do, Jonah?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate too. I've seen a lot of content like this because having worked with podcasts and many clients before, there's a lot of people out there trying to teach you how to do it all yourself because they want to avoid, like, I think it's more chasing the like emotional aspect of like, you don't need to hire someone. You don't need to do this. You don't need to do that. And then I've worked with clients like that and they get so exhausted. So I appreciate, I can just vouch for and say, like, you have such a functional for your life, such a functional system and a way of teaching it. It's fantastic. Yeah.
And my show wouldn't sound nearly as good without the engineer that I work with. And I think literally the first video of the podcast or of the course, I say, like, please hire an engineer. And we do have a lesson on some basics for mixing where I talk to him and he gives some advice. Mm-hmm. But we're both just like, please don't do it yourself.
Right.
Because ultimately, like, audio engineers have been trained to do this. They've spent so much more time in it than you ever will. They can get so much more done in an hour than you could do in an hour. You might like spend an hour just trying to get the volume changed because you don't know how to do volume in your podcast editing software. So, like, please invest in it. It pays off. It's not a huge cost to you. And if you are thinking about making a show, like, that is the most worthwhile investment you could possibly make. So you can spend your time preparing for great conversations, getting great guests. If you do want to go into the level of detail that I do in editing the show, like, you're editing great sounding audio and then you send it back to get it mixed together. That's like a good use of your time.
Right.
So that's really great.
Well, because I know there's going to be a few more questions rolling in. Well, that is, I did have a couple questions I kind of wanted to ask you, which is, first off, I love the fact that you say start out with A-level guests, because I think that people just don't have the like gumption to just go and ask, but you never know who you can get if someone has 15 minutes, 40 minutes free. and you choose a good topic. But do you recommend doing that like right out of the gate, or do you build a little bit before you go? Like, how do you
You
get your
do
first A level guest? I guess is kind of the boiled down question.
you should have some level of comfort in talking to somebody like that before you do it.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's kind of counterintuitive, but you actually have a better chance of getting somebody who's like a hard get when they don't have anything to look at versus when they look at something that looks like it doesn't have any traction. Because you have like you have possibility in your corner because if I look at your show and you're trying to get me on there and I see that you have 200 episodes and 5 ratings and I don't recognize any of the names there, I'm going to think this isn't for me. But if you reach out to me and you tell me a good idea for a show that fits what I like to talk about and there's nothing to look at, I might take a flyer and do it. But like you want to show up prepared to lead a good interview. So don't
Right.
like you should absolutely do some practice episodes if this is your first podcast with friends, even like
Right.
things that will never see the light of day, just so you get comfortable using the software. You get comfortable speaking on the microphone. You make sure that you have your right like input device selected and the audio comes out clean. Like definitely do that. My first episode of Creative Elements was with Seth Godin, and the second was with James Clear. Those were not the first episodes I even recorded for this show. I
Right.
recorded several
Right.
others first, but it's good to go out of the gates with a strong guest because I'm amazed looking at my analytics every week how many people still listen to episode 1 every week. Like people are finding the show and they're starting from the beginning. I'm like, thank God that it's something that I'm proud of and a guest that like speaks to the quality of the show.
Yeah. Well, and that is unique to podcasts. Like I've seen that with multiple podcasts where people actually go to the beginning. Like it's rare, I think, you get a YouTuber where someone's like, what was their very first video? So it is really cool. So just to highlight, because I think that's so cool, you could build, if you were doing a season or something, you could build a season or your first 10, 15 episodes with A-level creators on using the fact that you had the mystery. And I don't want to say mystery because you're not trying to cheat anyone, but that you have that on your side, right?
Now, I would encourage you, if you're going that route, to get your artwork made and invest in the artwork as well. Because
so you look as good as possible.
Yep, I can make some assumptions from the artwork too. And we talk about that in the course, how to make artwork that stands out. Spoiler, I'm actually changing the Creative Elements artwork next week. So it's been a big change. It's been scary, but I'm doing it. Proud of the artwork that I have, but I think it could stand out more. And like, it's a huge part of your show. It's worth doing well.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to turn into some of the questions here because we've got a few great questions rolling in. So Indigenous Wellness Training Society is asking, how do you do all that with just a Rodecaster Pro and a pod mic?
Well, thanks for the question. Let me give the caveat that I have not used a Rodecaster Pro personally directly, but let me just say, like, that is a good input source to record good audio. And once you have recorded good audio, you can do all the things that I just said using editing software, which are free versions. If you're on a Mac, GarageBand is great. If you're on a PC, they do have Audacity is free. Some people are saying not to use Audacity anymore, so you have other options. Descript is what I would use if I were starting over today and I was learning up software for the first time. Descript is probably a good thing for me to use now, but I've already learned GarageBand, and I don't really have a reason to learn something new. So that Rodecaster Pro and PodMic, it's going to give you a good, clean audio recording of your own voice, and that's all you need.
Yeah. And just to chime in, because I have used Rodecasters and worked with them, my only bit of advice is read the manual, make sure that if you're going to work with an engineer, which we recommend you do, right, that you are actually getting multiple files that you can send to the engineer, because sometimes there's the options to do music and stuff. People get excited and they end up with one file that has your voice, the music, everything, and your engineer is just not going to be able to help you. So just wanted to chime in because it's an easy mistake to make. But let's see. Janice is asking, is a podcast a way to make money? And if
Yes.
so, how? If not, tell us more about how podcast works to build an audience and attract customers. Great
Of
question,
course it
Jay.
is. Of course it is. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of ways for you to do that. I cover all of them in depth in the course, but let me run through some of them now. Advertising is like the most obvious thing, right? When you hear podcasts and they have like Squarespace being advertised, which isn't as often anymore. Squarespace must have stepped back from that. That's usually handled through like an agency and purchased on a CPM model. CPM stands for cost per meal, and that's MILLE, means 1,000. So it's how many dollars per 1,000 impressions, and often it's like 20 to 40. So if you have a show that's getting 1,000 downloads and you sold an ad to Squarespace, that would be $20 to you. That's not worth it to you. That's not worth it to Squarespace. It's not worth it to the agency that's working with you. You have to have a pretty high level of scale to do the CPM model. However, if you have a show that has a specific audience, I would encourage you to find out who else sells products or services to that audience that are higher priced than a $5 trinket. Upside, my other show, has not done nearly as well in terms of downloads and listeners, but it's done really well on advertising because our advertisers were client service firms like law and recruiting firms. One customer, which it'd be easy to find even with our podcast guests, pays for their sponsorship easily. So there are guests that you can work direct deals with who may have never advertised on a podcast before, and that's okay. You'll have to explain how this works. That will pay whatever price you think makes sense between the two of you. You can make that worthwhile. You can also sell your own products or services. This is what I recommend a lot of people do in the beginning. When I had advertising inventory and no advertisers, I would advertise my courses in my ads. Easy
If
peasy.
you like
I might
this
even just
podcast, like,
yeah,
here's what
yeah. You could also probably advertise like affiliate products that you're an affiliate for.
Which
could
there's a
sell
lot
merch.
of affiliates you could sign up for free, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah.
So a lot of ways to do it. Podcasting definitely makes money, and I would encourage you to set the explicit goal that you do want it to make money, at least to make it sustainable and cover your costs to hire an audio engineer who does a great job. And you can do that pretty easily out of the gate. You might even just say like, hey, I'm going to have one title sponsor. That's going to be you, Company X. I want you to pay me $5,000 a year. That's going to cover my costs. It's going to put your logo small on the artwork of the episode. You're going to be announced at the beginning of every episode. Like you can certainly cover your costs and make some money with podcasting.
Yeah. And so just to clarify, because I think it's so great, it's harder to find the second half of what you just said when you go to Google, which is that you can just reach out to companies in that sphere and try and make a deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of it? You just reach out, or
Are
are there services to go through? Or
there's like a really great website called Podcorn that I like a lot. That's kind of an intermediary. But I would just reach out directly. Find the person who leads marketing. If it's a smaller team, like maybe find the founder. You need to show why there's alignment between your podcast guests and their customers. And you go for it. Some people I know have even like really put themselves on the line to go the extra mile to say like, hey, I'm going to run the sponsorship for your company for free for this period of time. And if it would have paid for itself, then I want you to, become a paying sponsor. So very doable.
that's so good. I love it. Those are opinions and ideas you just don't hear very often when you just are looking out there. That's so awesome. Moving on. How can we get in touch with people to be interviewed? Thank you, Jay. P.S. Your voice is really amazing.
Thank you, Sinette or Sine. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but that's a very kind compliment. You just reach out. Email has been how we do it typically, but I've also connected with people through DMs on Twitter and Instagram. Before you reach out, spend some time casually engaging with them on those platforms. People recognize your name and photo if before you slide into their DMs, you've already liked and retweeted some of their stuff. Now, don't be aggressive. Don't be the reply guy who's just replying for the sake of replying and not saying anything additive. That gets actually annoying. But engage with the people that you want to have on your show. And then when you reach out, it's just like a heck yes, you've been awesome. I would love to do that for you. But really, like, email is how I do 90% of my outreach.
Yeah, and you got to try, right? You just throw
Got it.
yourself out. Yeah. Great question, especially as more, and we were even talking about this a little before, like the video element in this modern world is so important. And so Janice is asking, is a video podcast better than an audio podcast? Do you do both? What's your opinion or approach to that?
I'm actually going to answer this while also answering FX question of, do you always do remote interviews at the same time? Better is a subjective word, right, Janice? I wish that I had a wonderful video version of my podcast that was as high quality as the audio version. But the reality is I do a ton of editing on the audio version. So for the video version to be as good, I would have to be doing a ton of editing on that. That's a lot of work. And also because I do always do remote interviews, FX, I've had 2 in-person interviews all time because I live here in Columbus, but I do remote almost exclusively. It's hard for me to think of a format that is really, truly engaging in video in as high quality as audio. But I want to figure it out because podcast discovery is not great. And there is still some benefit to be had of putting a video podcast on YouTube. It needs to be video. You can't just put like audio with a thumbnail on YouTube and expect it to do well. It needs to be video. But there's some benefit to having a full-length video podcast and then also having small video clips that people can discover by searching for the person's name or a question that gets them interested to watch the full-length video podcast, which gets them to discover the fact that your podcast exists. Maybe they subscribe to audio. But I mean, it also doesn't really matter. Like, you can monetize a video podcast exclusively. So I won't say it's better. It's definitely like an aspirational state if you can do it and do it well. If you're doing in-person interviews, I think it's actually easier. But it's also really hard to do. Yeah, because like it makes it more like a video viewing experience that I want. Like, how often do you go to YouTube and search for something and the answer you watch is a side-by-side Zoom recording? Like, never. Like, YouTube wants native video. So if you can't do it in person, that helps. That's good, but it's really hard to do.
So quick follow-up, which is, if you decide to do both, do you recommend just making like the audio podcast the same as the video, differentiating the two? Because you can still put a audio version out of your video podcast, right? Like, you would do both?
Yeah, I think it depends on which you want to be your primary, because I know people that like primarily they make YouTube videos, but they thought I could just strip the audio out and make this a podcast too. Great, awesome, because you're really trying on video. For me, I care most about audio right now. So like, I will not compromise on the audio experience being really, really good. I want the video experience to be just as good, but with the added element of video, if not even better. So I don't know. That's honestly what's holding me up from doing video, is I don't know how to do that as high quality as the audio. Some people said like, well, just don't edit the video. Like, just let the video be the more raw version of it. And I feel like that will undermine the legitimacy that I've put into the audio experience.
Especially when you have like comments like, this is like an NPR podcast or something. That's because you put so much work into making that experience. Yeah. I really respect that, because I have seen a lot of podcasts where they're just spitting out the audio from the video, and it works, but it's not, you can feel it's different.
I am also fortunate that almost every guest I have in Creative Elements already has a good audio setup because they're creators. So remote works nicely.
That was my other follow-up question to FX's question, which, just to throw up again, was, do you do remote interviews, some in person? You've talked about all the ways you can control your audio. How the heck do you control the guest's audio? Do you have any system for that, or do you brief the guest? Like,
I in the calendar invite, I say like, please, have your computer charged in, be on do not disturb, be close to a router if possible. Please wear headphones. If you have a USB mic, that's amazing. If not, corded headphones with the mic are second best. Worst case scenario, use Bluetooth. So that's all in like the interview or the email that goes out. And then when we get on Squadcast like this, when we're talking immediately, I'm listening for like, how is this? Because sometimes they're not wearing headphones. Please put in headphones if you have them. Sometimes I can tell that their gain, they have a Yeti and their gain is way too high. And I'll say like, please turn that down. You got to like work that out before you start recording. Because if you work with an engineer, what you don't really want to do is have them changing a bunch of settings constantly during the recording, because it kind of screws up their editing process.
Right.
So before you start recording, try to troubleshoot some audio issues and get it to sound as good as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and there's also things like gain, right? Like an engineer can't fix that. They can try, but yeah. And then Denise, hopefully that answered your question there. But just to review quick, like ideally they have a mic, headphones with a mic after that, and if nothing else, you make do. But you brief them on that. You make that part of that like initial process.
Yeah. Really, all they need is a computer and headphones. Even like they don't technically need headphones, because a lot of tools now will let you turn on what's called echo cancellation, which is like the tool's control for people not wearing headphones. But you'll notice it in the audio quality, because it does some like active dampening of sound that just isn't great. Janice asked you to do a sound check session immediately before, days before, immediately before. Because again, I'm trying to get time from people who are super time strapped. So I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for them to say yes, no prep, only one session. And I try to get through it like quickly, which they appreciate. Honestly, those people like appreciate that I can do that in a short period of time, and don't put a lot on them.
Right. Well, we do have to wrap up for time, but thank you so much, Jay. I appreciate that so much. And for just the way you wrap it all up, and your approach is so valuable. I love that you make it's both doable, but you also recognize the places where you compromise or figure the vision and just put it all together in an actually doable way that works within your life, because you can't expect to just like start being a full-time podcaster like tomorrow. Unless you're blessed with like you're independently wealthy or something, but most of us need steps.
I'm actually jumping off to do an interview right now, so thank you guys for coming. Please take us up on this Discover Fest offer for the course if this is interesting to you. We go so much deeper in it, but thanks for being here, and hopefully you got the slides there as well if you wanted them.
Yeah. Appreciate it so much. Have a wonderful day, Jay. And everyone who's watching, please hop in the comments. Let Jay know how much you appreciated it. And check out the link in the description or the comments for the course, and also the full Discover Fest events. The whole week of schedules is there as well. We appreciate you all so much. Have a wonderful day. See you later, Jay.